Hi everybody, and welcome back to Murder at Bedtime. If you're a regular listener, you are the Mutts Nuts, and you don't know how grateful I am to you. If this is your first time here, then this is a 15 to 20 minute, no waffle, no frills, no adverts, no sponsors, true crime bedtime story, and I hope you enjoy it and decide to stay. Any waffle is at the end, so you can turn me off at the end of the story or listen on for me spouting my usual gobbledygook. And with that, let's get serious and crack on with the story that I have called Blood in the Perambulator. Just a warning, this story contains details of a brutal murder and the death of a child. If this may be a trigger for you, please don't listen to this one. On the morning of the 24th of October 1890, Mary Pearcey shouted to a young boy called Willie Holmes and beckoned him to her front door. She gave him 1 penny to go and run an errand for her. She required him to take a note to 141 Prince of Wales Road and give it to Mrs. Phoebe Hogg. The note was an invitation to tea that afternoon at her rooms at 2 Priory Street, Kentish Town. Later that afternoon, 32-year-old Phoebe and her baby daughter, also called Phoebe, but known as Tiggy, set off to Mrs. Pearcey's home and were never seen alive again. At 7 p.m. that evening, a man coming home from work was coming down Crossfield Road when he saw what looked like a woman lying at the side of the street. Her face was covered by what looked like a blanket. Thinking she was drunk, he walked on. Then, thinking she may have had a fit or such like, he went to find a policeman. He duly found one, and P.C. Arthur Gardner accompanied him back. P.C. Gardner took her pulse, of which there was none, then lit a match and pulled the brown sleeveless cardigan, not a blanket, covering her face, and saw the poor woman's bloody face and source of the horror that the woman's throat had been cut from ear to ear. He blew his whistle for assistance and sent out for a doctor. Before the doctor arrived, the policeman did deduce that by the lack of blood, this was not the site of the murder, and it must have been committed elsewhere. When a Dr. Arthur Wells duly arrived a short time later, he thought, as the body was still warm, she had only been dead an hour or so. At 10:30 p.m. that night, P.C. John Rosa, on his beat, about 2.5 miles from where the woman's body was found, in a place called Hamilton Terrace, saw a baby's pram standing against a wall with a brown skin rug covering it. When he raised his lantern and turned back the rug, he could see the inside was soaked in blood, so he wheeled it back to the station. At around 6 a.m. the following morning, Frank Hogg awoke at 141 Prince of Wales Road and noticed that his wife wasn't there. Now, I'd have thought that weird, getting home from work and she's not there, going to bed and waking up and she's still not there, but apparently Phoebe had mentioned she might go and visit her sick father in Rickmansworth. Anyway, off he went to work. But by 8:30 a.m. he was getting concerned and decided to find out where she was. He told his sister Clara to go and see a Mrs. Pearcey because she was a woman his wife was friendly with, while he would go and catch a train to Rickmansworth to see if she had gone to visit her father. Clara went to Mrs. Pearcey's house and asked if she had seen Phoebe. At first she said no, then changed her story to seeing her fleetingly when Phoebe asked if she could borrow some money and also asked if she could look after the baby for a while. Mrs. Pearcey said she could do neither. While out searching together, Clara saw a description of the garments the victim had been wearing in a newspaper. One of those things described was ladies' undergarments embroidered with the initials P.H. Straight away, Clara knew it was Phoebe and set off to the police station with Mary Pearcey in tow. At the station, they were met by Inspector Bannister, who took them to the mortuary. Clara viewed the body, while a highly agitated Mrs. Pearcey kept trying to drag her away and getting more and more hysterical until the inspector told her to leave the room. After this, Clara confirmed it was her sister-in-law, Phoebe Hogg. Straight away, the husband, Frank Hogg, became the number one suspect, and the police went to search his house at 141 Prince of Wales Road. They found nothing incriminating, but when they searched Frank himself, they found a key on him. When asked where the key was for, he replied it was for Mary Pearcey's house. Inspector Bannister decided it was time to take Frank Hogg and Mary Pearcey down to the station for further questioning. At the station, Mary was told in front of Clara that they would be searching her house. She calmly gave them her key, but then suddenly bolted out of her chair, exclaiming, "I think I should go with them. I don't think they will be able to get in." The police went in, and on inspection of the first rooms they noticed nothing suspicious, but when they reached the kitchen things were different. There was blood, and quite a lot of it, on the walls and ceiling. Some things, including a rug, had been part cleaned with paraffin. 2 panes of glass in the window were broken with the glass outside. There was blood on a poker which fit the shape for the murder weapon, and also blood on one of 2 carving knives. What was very strange was when she was asked about all the blood, she sat at her piano singing and playing as loud as she could, trying to drown out the questions, chanting, "Killing mice, killing mice, killing mice." She was arrested and led out of her house in front of all her neighbours into a waiting cab and taken to the station, all the way protesting her innocence. At 6 a.m. the next morning, a hawker called Oliver Smith, walking through wasteland called Cockenhoop Field on the Finchley Road, a mile from where Phoebe was found, spotted a bundle on the ground. Realising it was the body of a baby, he went off to find a policeman and returned with Reserve PC James Dickerson, who confirmed the child was dead. Back at the mortuary, it was discovered that Tiggy had been suffocated, most probably when her mother's body had been put on top of her in the pram. Phoebe, it was found, had been hit so hard on the head her skull had fractured in several places and splinters of bone had entered her brain. She probably would have been unconscious, but it was thought she was still alive when her throat was cut. The cut was so deep, severing the spinal column, that it was agreed it would have taken a lot of strength, and Inspector Bannister was convinced that someone else apart from Pearcey was involved. Frank Hogg and Mary Pearcey were questioned separately, and the facts that they had been lovers since before Frank married Phoebe and they had carried on their affair since came out. Pearcey was charged with murder and Hogg released. On Sunday, November the 2nd, 1890, 3,000 people turned out for Phoebe and Tiggy's funeral. 150 police officers, either mounted or on foot, had to push the crowd back when Frank Hogg arrived. He had to walk through a barrage of abuse, boos and hisses on his way towards the church, and the same happened as the crowd waited for him to appear after the service. Mary Pearcey's trial started at the Old Bailey on December the 1st, 1890, in front of Judge Justice Denham. The evidence against her was overwhelming, but she pleaded not guilty, saying she had no memory of the murder and would not have been able to do that to someone. Her next-door neighbour had heard screams and breaking glass on the evening of the murder coming from Pearcey's kitchen. Other witnesses had seen her pushing the heavily laden pram. John Pearcey, the man whose name Mary had taken, but they were in fact never married and were no longer together, testified that the sleeveless cardigan covering Phoebe's head had belonged to him, and he had left it at Mrs. Pearcey's flat when he moved out. The search of Mrs. Pearcey's kitchen had shown blood on the walls and ceiling, a rug that there had been an attempt to clean with paraffin, 2 broken panes of glass in the kitchen window, blood on a poker which fitted the shape of the weapon which had fractured Phoebe's skull, and 2 carving knives, one of which had blood on it. Also, there was the partial confession to Sarah Sawhill, who was attending to Mary when she changed into her prison clothes. She had said she had indeed invited Phoebe Hogg to her house for tea, and Phoebe had made a remark that led to an argument. Then Mary stopped herself before incriminating herself any further. Her defence was, argued her counsel, that it would be impossible for the slightly built Mrs. Pearcey to have caused such injuries to Mrs. Hogg. It would have required tremendous strength to cut through the spine and to push the overloaded pram, not made for such weight, such a distance. Unfortunately for her defence lawyer and Mary, the jury believed she could, and on the 3rd day of the trial they took just 52 minutes to find her guilty. Judge Denham then donned the black cap and sentenced Mary Pearcey to death. James Berry hanged Mary Pearcey on Tuesday the 23rd of December at 8 a.m. He said she was the calmest person present and went to her death with dignity. The crowd outside Newgate Prison waited for the black flag to be hoisted, then slowly drifted away. Madame Tussauds had a tableau made in their Chamber of Horrors a week before the execution and were just waiting for the death mask of Mary to complete their story. They had acquired nearly everything from Mary's kitchen, and the ever so dodgy Frank Hogg had sold them the pram and had even sold them his beard. On its opening day, 30,000 people filed past the new exhibit. Now, I know from messages I received that some of you like the story short and snappy, and some of you like a bit of background on the murderer. So if you do like a bit of detail, here we go. Mary Pearcey was born Mary Eleanor Wheeler in 1866. She took the name of John Charles Pearcey, but they were never married. John left her in the end due to her infidelities. One man she saw on a regular basis actually paid the rent on her rooms, but it was seen that she was smitten with removal man Frank Hogg, and he would actually go to Mary's house regularly even after he was married to Phoebe, and she would introduce him as her husband. It was she that persuaded Hogg to marry Phoebe when she became pregnant, and she actually nursed Phoebe back to health when she was quite seriously ill. Phoebe afterwards calling her by her family name Nellie. By all reports by people, even those who didn't agree with her lifestyle, she was a kind and generous young lady. By all intents and purposes, it looked like she accepted she had to share Frank. So what happened on the day of the murder in her kitchen? We probably will never know. Was it premeditated, or did she just snap at something Phoebe said to her? Did she do it alone, or did she have help? I personally think she just snapped at something that was said, but Frank Hogg doesn't come out of this smelling of roses. One thing we do know is that she sent a message to Hogg asking him to visit her in prison. He never arrived and she was inconsolable. And finally, what was the cryptic message she got her solicitor, Freak Palmer? Yep, that really was his name. I think it was short for Frederick. To put in the newspaper, I believe it was a Spanish newspaper, which read, MECP, last wish of MEW, have not betrayed MEW. Was it an accomplice? Once again, we will probably never know. So that's the end of the story, and now it's time. All the sensible people are switching me off and going to sleep, leaving me with you, my little band of murder at bedtime masochists who for some reason like to listen to my gobbledygook, or you just can't sleep. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the brilliant book on this case that I bought by Sarah Beth Hopton, called The Devil at the Door. It is the definitive book on this case, unputdownable, so much more detail than I have put in this story. So what's happened since last time? Well, let's see. I appeared on the Grizzly Books YouTube show hosted by the lovely Gisela Kay and with the amazing Lindsay of Stolen From Me YouTube channel and Debbie Q from the fabulous The Right Shoe podcast. All four of us became firm friends when we started our podcast journey, and it was the first time we had all met up together virtually for a chat, and it was amazing. I'd like to say a massive congratulations to Lindsay. Her channel has just reached 10,000 subscribers. Well done, Linz. Amazing stuff. All your hard work came to fruition in the end. Also, she has a new channel coming in early September called Lindsay's Scary Stories, so I'm looking forward to that. I am going to be on Grizzly Books live stream the last Friday in every month on the Grizzly Books channel, where Debbie Q, Chris from How's It Haunting podcast, and Chris and Eddie from Scream Time Horror podcast and myself will discuss a case we have all researched the previous month. I'm now on TikTok. Yes, this old fogey has moved into the modern world, so please catch me there. And if you listen to the podcast, please rate and review, because even 1 star helps. And please, if you have a look at the YouTube and like it, please subscribe. Finally, I'd like to put a shout out to Stephen of Chile Island in Leighton Buzzard. I found his shop by accident on Sunday. He was very friendly and has a brilliant shop. If you like anything a bit hot and spicy, then he has it. So all pop down and see him at Chile Island, 12 Peacock Mews, Leighton Buzzard. And also, finally again, I'd like to say a big thank you for Gisela Kay for designing my new logo, and as always to Jonathan Segev for allowing me to use his cursed lullaby as my intro. Well, that's the waffle for this week. I know it's a bit longer than normal, but sorry. Please continue messaging me. I love getting your messages. I love hearing from you all. And remember, watch out for those frogs in boxes. They're all mad. Night night.